So this is the annual ArcaOS, ArcaNoe update. I'll try to go through things quickly. Let me know if I run over anything too quickly. Just stop me and I'll go back. I'm going to try to make up for some lost time here. As I said during my presentation at Warpstock Europe this year, just so everyone knows, because a lot of times people will say, well, why isn't that out yet? Why can't I use that? Why do only the testers have it? We don't release non-GA software. If it's not ready for release, it doesn't come from us. We can't take people's money for software that doesn't work, so we need to be reasonably assured that it's working as designed when we let it out into the wild. We don't include in a GA release third-party components that are still considered to be beta components, even if the rest of whatever it is that we're putting out we consider to be finished, until those components are no longer listed as beta. And we don't rush new releases just so we can crank up version numbers and say, look at all the versions we released. We're on a rapid release cycle. Firefox 127. As I say, we don't subscribe to any rapid release cycle. Version numbers are identifiers for us. They're not particularly milestones of any sort. We take a lot of time to test our software very carefully across as many systems as we think people will be using as possible. Obviously, we can't catch every single system. That's why we have a ticketing system. When it doesn't work on your hardware, open a ticket for us. Remember the first rule of opening tickets? If there's no ticket, there's no problem. So if you've got a problem and then you go to OS2 World or you go to ECS Technical and you say to everyone else, I'm having a problem with, that's not a problem for us. That's a water cooler discussion.
Yeah.
Okay?
I consider it a lifestyle thing.
That's we set a list of goals for each release that we have, and we try to stick to that list. So we have a blockers ticket for each release of ArcaOS. We have certain things in the blockers ticket that we consider to truly be blockers, and we have a list of other things in the blockers ticket which we consider to be optional. So maybe they'll get fixed along the way. If they annoy one of us enough, we'll stop and say, all right, I spent 3 days, I couldn't take it anymore. And I know it was on the optional list, but now it's done. And it's done. We don't have to look at it again. But that may not mean that it's necessarily very important to anyone else. We spend a lot of time with the installer. Now, typically, when you do an install, you install it one time on one machine, and then you'll do an update on that machine. We do it time after time after time after time, and after the 50th time going through the installer, we say, I can't stand looking at that anymore. No one else would probably even notice. But we notice, so we'll add something to the blockers list. We really try hard so that the user experience is consistent across all of the operating system. So when you're on the desktop, we really don't want to ship things that look so foreign to an OS2 desktop as to appear to be from something else.
Oh, okay.
We want you to be able to find what you're doing. We really, really do bear in mind the common user access model from IBM. The most important thing to us is the stability of the system. We will not knowingly ship software that is unstable, even if it might perform better on some systems. We will not knowingly configure software for performance versus reliability. We may add a note to our wiki page that says if you want to try to eke out more performance from your Samba connection, here are some tuning tips. But that doesn't mean that Samba is going to come out of the box tuned for optimal performance, because that optimal performance may work fine on my machine and it may absolutely tank the performance on your network. We try to shoot for a middle of the road, most stable in most conditions scenario. But OS2 is extremely flexible and it's extremely tunable. And we leave that to each individual system and each individual set of circumstances. Because even the same hardware on two different networks can behave vastly different from one another. The same hardware with two separate sets of software applications by two different users running two different ways. Someone keeps a browser running all the time and then opens a word processor and then opens a spreadsheet. Someone else opens a text editor and opens a compiler. So it's hard for us to gauge what's going to work best in all of these situations, so we try to shoot down the middle. And we really, really do take our work very seriously. We have weekly staff meetings. A weekly staff meeting for us is a half a day on IRC. We have an agenda that we set every week. We prioritize commercial tickets over personal tickets. And I'm really serious about that. When we sell a commercial license, we provide commercial support, which means every week we start off discussing any open commercial tickets that need attention. And then we open up the discussion to all support tickets which need attention before we start going into our development stuff. So, some release terminology, just so everyone's familiar. The major version number is to the left of the decimal point. So, OS2 Warp left off at 4.52. So we started ArcaOS at 5.0 because for us that was a major milestone for OS2 Warp. We consider Ecom Station to be an offshoot of OS2, but not a predecessor to ArcaOS. Our direct predecessor is Warp 4.52. We inherited nothing from Ecom Station when we started ArcaOS.
Except Roderick.
Except, well, input from people who had previously been involved in Ecom Station. A significant point release is less than a major release, but it's more than bug fix. So 5.1, 5.2, we have not yet hit 5.1. So we don't have a significant point release yet. Bug fix or maintenance releases, after the second decimal point, okay? Right now it's the third digit, but. So we're now up to release 5.0.4, and we will have a 5.0.5. It wasn't originally planned. We had planned to go straight from 5.04 to 5.1, but there's too much for us to squeeze into 5.1 to go straight there. We expect 5.05 to release mid-2020. And I say expect, as a rule, we do not give estimated delivery dates. So this is just, if I were shooting from the hip today, I'd say, yeah, by the middle of next year, it'll be ready to go. Now, whether the middle of next year is next April, or it's next July, or next August, sometime before the end of next year, surely. 5.1 will probably be sometime the year after, 2021. I don't expect, at this point, for 5.1 to ship before the end of 2020. There's just way too much to do. We will have 5.1.1, 5.1.2, after 5.1.0. I don't know how many of those we'll need to see. They're maintenance and bug fix releases. We don't know about bugs of which we have no knowledge yet. In fact, those bugs don't exist. That's the great part about it.
We're coding them today.
That's So and 5.2 will be the next significant point release after that. So in 5.0.5, you can expect more pre-boot and installer enhancements. USB 3 will be selectable in pre-boot, and we will auto-detect USB 3 on the system. And we will be able to boot on UEFI hardware without a CSM. So that's pretty modern equipment. The goal is for us to ship a hybridized ISO so that you can put one ISO in either a traditional architecture machine or a UEFI machine, and it will boot correctly to whichever one is required. We will ship at least 2 national language versions in 5.05. That will be German and Spanish for the first time. These are, remember that ArcaOS up to this point has been English only. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means that you'll be able to update 5.0, 5.1, 5.0.1, 5.0.2, 3, and 4 to 5.0.5 English. But if you want a national language version, that's got to be a clean install. So I can't take 5.0.4 English and apply the update to 5.0.5 Spanish. That really won't work. You'll end up with something, I'm not sure exactly where in the middle that would leave us.
French.
Yeah, you'd end up with something Latin somewhere along the line. We will have updated Mozilla apps. So what Roderick was talking about before with Firefox 45, CMonkey 242.9 extended service release, and Thunderbird, what's the Thunderbird version, 45.9 also? Is that what it is? I think so. Those will be in there, and they will be installed via RPM. We'll have most likely a command line FTP replacement to IBM's old FTP client, which is really showing its age these days if you use FTP at all. We'll have some more editors in there. We'll have some updated tools, so installation tools, maintenance tools. We're expecting locale and keyboard updates. After IBM left off development, there were some changes to some non-US keyboard layouts, interestingly enough. Spanish keyboard layout is different now than it was when IBM stopped development. And we're looking at how we can support those other keyboard layouts out of the box. IBM did not provide a lot of tools for making changes like that to the keyboard tables. So we're considering the best way for long-term support for us to make those changes. Locale, there are some pretty, if you set German as your language, there are some oddities in the formatting of euro amounts and things like that. So we want to try to stabilize that for the 21st century. Things are written a little bit differently now than they were in the mid-1990s. We will have an updated Samba client. In fact, in the latest beta, we have the latest 4.10 Samba client that is available from the upstream Samba project in the latest beta. So we will finally be current with the stable release of Samba. We've tweaked ArcaMapper now so that normally when you install ArcaMapper, along with it comes the old Samba client installed to a different directory, because ArcaMapper has a dependency on those executables being where it expects them to be. That's now out of the picture. We will find the updated Samba client in path, and ArcaMapper should load and use that instead. Don't expect a new Arca mapper in 5.05. One of the plans for 5.1 is a completely rewritten Arca mapper. That's not going to make it into 5.05. Trust me. But this will at least cut down on the redundancy and the confusion of having some older files laying around that you don't really use for anything other than to satisfy Arca mapper startup and browsing of trees. Gesundheit. Whether David whips together an NVMe driver for 5.05 or not is anyone's guess. So maybe it will show up, maybe it won't. NVMe is needed for very modern laptops, which are moving away from SATA connections for their SSDs. Sometimes you can't even tell when you look at the specifications for a new laptop whether it comes with a SATA connector in it or whether it's NVMe. It may just say M.2 connection, but M.2 is a form factor, not an interface. So you can have SATA M.2 or you can have NVMe and M.2. Until you open up the machine, you won't even know what's in there. So NVMe is on our prioritized list of drivers for the operating system, but it may or may not be available for 5.05. Again, it may be in beta when 5.05 is ready to ship, and if it's in beta, it's not shipping with 5.05. It will not ship until we're satisfied that no one's going to lose any data using it.
It's a big project.
Huge, huge. Multi-Mac WLAN, don't expect that with 5.05. Maybe, miracles happen, but expect that for the near term, you'll need to use a bridge device. If you've got a newer laptop that's got USB-C on it, that support is not going to be coming along anytime soon. It will occur at some point in the future. We will have to support it, and an updated USB Ethernet driver to handle those things for laptops that don't have Ethernet ports. That's definitely not going to be in 5.05. I can tell you that right now. DT Audio is hopefully going to ship in 5.05. We have some installation stuff we need to work out so that installs right and updates the files properly and is useful and usable. Qt5 will most likely ship in 5.05, and Falcon will most likely ship in 5.05. We will not replace Firefox with Falcon as our default browser unless selected if Falcon is fairly stable at that point, and we do include it, it would be an option to set Falcon as the default browser versus Firefox or CMonkey. The way CMonkey installs now, if you do a custom installation, you select to install CMonkey, you have the option to select it as your default browser. That would be the way we would add Falcon to the mix. An updated Snap, possible. There are some more things that we want to do with Snap. The grad components that Snap uses have already been updated. So in that sense, there is an updated Snap in the latest beta. Some of these things, as I say, haven't even been cobbled together yet. 5.1. So 5.1 is going to take 9 to 12 months or more from the release of 5.05, just because of how much stuff is supposed to go into it. So what I'm about to say is extremely speculative, since none of the work on 5.1 has started yet. All the work is right now focused on 5.05. The list is really subject to change, so what I say to you today may not hold true tomorrow, but I will tell you the truth as of today, mainly because I don't lie, I don't promise vaporware, and I don't say that we can do something we can't do. So, with that in mind, We want to provide an upgrade facility. Now there's a difference between update and upgrade. 5.0.0 to 5.0.4 is an update. Essentially, we apply all the changes that have gone in from 5.0.0 to 5.0.4 while keeping your desktop pretty much intact. 5.0 to 5.1 upgrade is going to be similar to an update for us because it's the same product, ArcaOS, but we may have file system layout changes. There are very few of those that occur in an update. Most things are in the same place on the system volume in 5.04 as they were in 5.0.0. That may not be the case in 5.1, so we need to handle moving those things around, which may also require tweaking the desktop to follow those motions. Because as we know, when you move things around and the workplace shell is not active, it leads to bad things. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that we may need to do in order to effect an upgrade. So an upgrade, if you open a ticket today about a problem after you are trying to update from 5.0.1 to 5.0.4, make sure that you say, I was updating, not upgrading. A migration facility is also on our roadmap to be able to take an ECS 1 or 2 and move that over to ArcaOS. Again, those are huge file system changes. ECS has an ECS directory off the root of the boot volume. We don't have that. We have a sys directory off the root of the boot volume. Dave?
Can I just ask you, I have like 502 installed and I have a 504 DVD. Can I put that in and it'll bring the...
Yes, anything from 5.0.0 all the way up. You put 504 in and you can update it to 504.
Okay.
Absolutely. So migrating from ECS, which is a different product, to ArcaOS is going to take some work, some file system changes. There's software that's shipped in ECS that doesn't ship with ArcaOS, so that needs to be then removed, archived. We need to do something with it. How we handle upgrade, don't expect a rollback facility if things fail. So as always, how many working backups do you need to have before you start any kind of an operation like this?
Two or three.
At least two. And one of them could be an image created by DFC. And if you don't have a DFC license, Steve, what were you going to say?
And it's a good idea to test your backup.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. A working backup. A working backup is not, okay, it finished copying. A working backup is it finished copying, I put in another disk and I tested the restore. That's a working backup.
You actually can sort of get around the disk. One of the techniques you can use to test your backup is hide your root drives and hide your other drive. If you have space and just create new partitions and restore to it. Then,
True.
You can either use that backup because it should be identical to what you backed up, and you'll have it on disk backup, or you can go back to use the other one if you like the old partitions better.
There are techniques. If you run into problems doing that before you are about to do an update or an upgrade procedure, open a ticket, or that's probably the best thing to do, open a ticket for us, and we'll provide some tips, and those tips will ultimately make it into the wiki so that we won't need to continually provide tips. That's how stuff gets into the wiki. Howard?
Do you have a recommended backup software apart from DFC?
We sell backup software on, there's PM Backup. Is that what we have in our store? Is that what it is?
I think I saw it yesterday.
I can't remember.
DFC.
There's,
RSync.
yeah, RSync is typically what I use for that.
It's a different type of backup.
Yeah.
It's not,
Yeah.
It's not a raw iron restore.
The nice thing about DFC when you create an image backup is that you really do you get a snapshot of what you've got. And with the browser, you can browse through the snapshot and see what's there. So what's a little tricky with an image backup is restoring just particular files, because it's a bit tedious to pick through, because that format's not really designed for doing that.
Well, it's not really true so much anymore with DFC.
Well, yeah, it's much better than
Well, you've got a file manager, and the question is, do you like the layout that Jan gave us? It's really that's about it.
yeah.
You know, what's the difference between using that to browse your backup and using FM2 to browse some other directory tree?
So the idea is that you have at least two known good working backups before you start a major operation like an update or an upgrade. Don't expect a rollback. Oh, it failed halfway through. I'll just click the rollback. Oh, there is no rollback button. Warp 4 to ArcaOS 5.1 is a little more difficult. Not every version of Warp 4 had LVM. And upgrading from Warp 4 FixPack 5 to ArcaOS 5.1 would be very painful.
You think it could be a non-starter?
Yeah, I think if you're still running Warp 4 FixPack 5, you need to inventory the software that you're running, look for your installation disks, zip a whole bunch of stuff, and wipe the drive, reformat, and hope for the best. That's, but if you're running Warp 4 FixPack 13, FixPack 15, that's one of the possible migration targets for us. We have an LVM drive, we can start with that. And again, it's file system layout that changes.
Those aren't even LVM though, right?
FixPack 13 has LVM.
But usually if you upgraded from zero,
If you upgraded from
you're not on an
FixPack,
LVM.
yeah, right, exactly, that's true. That's a good
You're
point.
gonna do a conversion right
Yeah.
there. Good luck.
So, yeah, there are a lot of ifs when we go back that far as to what's technically feasible for us to support. In fact, when we introduce the migration facility, it may only migrate ECS 2.0 and up. And then we may add ECS 1 dot whatever and up. And then backfill the rest.
A lot of it has to do with demand.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how many people are still running ECS 1.0? See? And we're going to spend how many
I still
weeks?
have it installed.
But Warp
You
4,
said-
Warp 4
Yeah.
I can make a business case for Warp 4. I can't really for
Yeah,
ECS.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. In the enterprise, we're going to find Warp 4 running. And we have situations in the enterprise where the systems that are running Warp 4 can't run anything newer, and the newer systems can't run Warp 4. So we need to have some way of taking that stuff. And a lot of enterprises we found do not have their original installation media for custom written software, and we have to sort of go backwards and pull out of their image all of those pieces for that software and get it stuffed into ArcaOS
Yeah, we
separately.
essentially rebuild the installer for
That's kind of what it is. So expect more installer tweaks and enhancements, oddities in the installer, things that don't seem quite consistent in the installer. Expect that stuff to be ironed out even further. We really do prioritize that. I would say when we first released ArcaOS, the first 6 months, the overwhelming number of personal comments I received was that I've never installed OS2 so easily before. So we really, really pride ourselves on the installer. Howard.
Any chance of getting rid of the requirement to scroll to the bottom of the license every time?
No.
Can we not have a box that says, I'm not a lawyer?
But we've made it a little bit easier, so you can use a keyboard,
Oh.
assuming you have keyboard support, and just page, and then you should be able to alt whatever the key is. You should be able to just hit the mnemonic to agree. So we made that a little bit easier. But the point is that And remember, some of the license terms, I'll be quite honest with you, are arcane. They're arcane. But remember, at the core of ArcaOS is OS 2.4, and we got IBM's license. And our agreement with IBM says that their software is subject to their license. They're not going to change their license. There is all sorts of funny stuff in their license. There were no virtual machines then. So if you want to install ArcaOS, 5 copies of ArcaOS under a virtual machine, under a hypervisor, there's no provision for that in the ArcaOS license. It's just not there. IBM also used to encourage people to create a maintenance partition and do another install in the maintenance partition. There's no provision in their license for you to make that second install.
Right, it was never really legal.
No.
You were never really licensed to do it, even though they told you to do it.
Even though they told you to do it. So there's all sorts of weird stuff in the license, so just make sure that you know what the terms of the license are, okay? An online update at the end of install. Now, why is that important? Well, it may not be overly important the first week or two after the release comes out, but when you're installing a version of ArcaOS 6, 9, 12 months after it was released, that's a lot of updates. It might be nice to get those before your system is up and running and you start installing software. Because a lot of people don't finish the install and then do an update afterwards. They finish the install, they go through the last reboot, and then they start putting their stuff in it. And then they run the update sometime later, like a week, 2 weeks, a month. So an online update at the end of install might be a nice feature for us. We'd like to add that. Some more locale fixes. Again, German is the one that came to my mind about the Euro formatting for currency, but there are others that are really dated at this point. They're not in step with the 21st century. So we want to add those as we release more NLVs, certainly. We hope to have the new audio driver in 5.1.
Wow.
Mikal considers Intel HD video to be the next chipset target for Snap.
That'd be nice.
Excellent.
Many
So,
laptops have that.
of course, the fact that Mikal considers that to be the next target and actually getting it to that point that's a separate issue. But
That's what he said back in SciTech days, so
yeah,
I think
exactly.
it's still on his mind. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's something that we would like to do. One of the new verticals that we're looking to target is the retro gaming market, as well as modern games written to run, look, and feel like retro games. And a lot of those have engines which require 3D graphics. There's no 3D graphics driver for OS 2.
Yeah.
So that would be something that would need to go into an accelerated video driver such as Snap. So it's there. We'd like to do it. Whether it gets into 5.1 or not, I have no idea at this point. New selective installers. When you run selective install in ArcaOS, you are running a stripped down version of Warp 4's selective installer, which is a beast unto itself. The beast that will not die. We've tried several times to drive a stake through that thing. But there are certain things that it does that we just haven't quite replaced yet. The plan is to have just a set of small applets to do things like change the locale and change the keyboard layout, change little things. So we want to get that thing out of there ultimately. 5.1 is a good target for doing that. Improved DOS session support. Now here's an interesting tidbit about the UEFI development that's been going on. One of the biggest problems with implementing UEFI is the lack of a video BIOS. So for the first time, probably since IBM did the development, we have a new base video handler, a new BVH driver, BVH EFI. And that implements a fairly robust, or it will implement a fairly robust VGA BIOS for us. The interesting side effect of that is that these machines where DOS sessions don't work should start working with that base video handler. So it'll be kind of interesting that more modern machines will have an easier time running DOS sessions than the current machines that we support, the newer end of the current machines that we support. So that will be something that will come in 5.1 just sort of as a bonus along the way. Credentials Manager, the neat thing about the Credentials Manager, is anyone familiar with Kerberos authentication?
Yeah.
Okay. Kerberos authentication, you request a ticket from a server, you get the ticket, and the ticket grants you access to different services. It can be to printers, it can be to file system shares. Samba 4 fully supports Kerberos authentication, so you don't need to do a login for that share. You get a ticket, and that ticket grants you access to that share. The problem with tickets is tickets expire. Kerberos tickets expire. They have a finite lifespan. They can be renewed, but at some point you need to type in your username and password again. Credentials Manager stores those for you in an encrypted format. We have test versions of the Credentials Manager now. Alex Taylor has worked that up for us. It's not quite as full-featured as we'd like it to be yet, but it will probably debut in 5.1. Samba 4 base server. Right now we ship Samba 4 client, and Samba server is the Samba 3 level from Bitwise. The plan is to have both client and server at the same functional level when we ship 5.1. And a new rewritten ArcaMapper. That's one of those things that's just got to happen. ArcaMapper needs to be made more consistent, more reliable, and more usable all around. It would be nice to have a new rewritten printer manager that unifies creating a PM printer, creating a CUPS printer, and manages printing in one umbrella. Now maybe we'll think better of that idea as we go along, but it's one of the plans that we have. The desktop notebook properties page, when you get to the background page, you'll notice that an old bug from Warp 4 is that your bitmaps are doubled up entries. That's a long-standing bug that we want to address. There's no, you can't normally list JPEGs in there. It'll only list your bitmaps by default. So there's a bunch of stuff that we'd like to change with that. I understand that Apple now does something interesting where, depending upon the time of day, you can select a wallpaper that changes from day to night shading. That would be kind of neat.
It's more than wallpaper. It's the whole thing.
It's the whole thing.
Yeah, everything in the user interface.
There you go. Okay, well, we'll probably get sued by Apple if we follow that model, but
It's like Android phones do it too.
what's that?
My Galaxy S10 does the same
Yeah.
thing.
Does the same thing?
Yeah.
Well, we'll probably get sued for it, but at least we get publicity. And what's worse than bad publicity? No publicity. Again, a new hardware manager. Lars did some work on an updated hardware manager that gives you a little bit more detail about your hardware. It's not quite finished. It's not exactly certainly what I was expecting or what I really wanted. So hopefully we'll have a new hardware manager in 5.1. Multimac WLAN drivers. Hopefully by 5.1, that will be they will be available for at least the more popular
What's on that?
chips. Desktop search utility. As our drives are getting bigger and bigger, it's getting harder and harder to remember where you put things. So desktop search, they can give you a preview of the file and search within different file types like search within PDFs, search within open office files, would really come in handy. Recall does that, and it accepts plugins to be able to search within different types of files that it doesn't know about out of the box. So we'd like to provide that with it. Java 8, of course. Java. What's the latest? Java 11. Is that what's out now?
Well,
An updated Java, because Java 6 is really getting long in the tooth at this point.
yeah.
Well, Java 8's getting long in the tooth.
Java 8's getting long in the tooth.
My favorite
Java
email
8
program
yet?
requires Java.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
All right.
that's what we have on tap. Now, along the way, of course, we'll continue to do driver updates and refinements. And the ones that we can make available to non-ArcaOS systems will be made part of the OS2 and ECS drivers and software subscription. We still sell those. There are still people using ECS. We realize that. Until we provide a full migration utility,
Yeah.
we don't expect everyone to just reformat the drive and reinstall.
Excellent.
So those subscriptions will be updated as best we can. Certain updates we can't include in that channel. So kernel updates we contractually cannot provide to work for or ECS systems.
This would be a good time to break for people to check.
Yes. Okay. So before I do the wrap up session, checkout is 12 o'clock. What time is it right
It's
now?
11:30 right now.
It's 11:30 right now. If you've got to get checked out, take care of that now. Stow your baggage. You can ask at the front desk and they'll hold it for you, or you can bring it in here. There's
Yep.
room in here. Whatever you like to do, but I don't want anyone to get stuck for an extra day just because I was
Yeah. And
rattling on.